Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Stillman and Jim Laird. We are going to be going live a lot of the time, a lot of days from now on, to talk about the things we see going on in modern day health and wellness, to educate you guys, to give you information that we see missing from the modern narratives, and I don't know what else to call them, on health and wellness. And today, Jim and I are going to kick off these lives by talking about the number one reason that we see that modern people are sick. In these lives, we're going to be doing a quote of the day, and our quote of the day is, "The physician treats, but nature heals." When I sat down today and I said, "Jim, what should we talk about?" And then I said, "Let's talk about the top reasons we see people being sick in our modern world." Jim said, "Look, that's really easy. It's just disconnection from nature." And Jim and I agree on this. If we had to put it into one single simple sentence, why people are sick and unwell in our modern world, it would be that they are disconnected from nature. Jim, why is that the number one thing you think is making modern people sick and miserable?
Well, it's just, you just look around. I mean, you walk around and people are pale, they're pasty. The statistic is that the average American spends 93% of their day indoors. And if we look at sun exposure, if we look at everything, I mean, the sun literally, your circadian clock, I believe, is the foundation of your health.
It is.
And, yesterday we were at an amusement park, and just a number of people that look ghostly white.
People look terrible.
It was insane.
The pastiness of the skin is really just the tip of the iceberg. I mean,
right.
Bad, biomechanics, people are slouched. People have got pelvic tilt they're not even aware of. You've taught me a lot of those things in the last 8, 9, 10 months since we started training together. There are so many problems that we both see when we look at modern people. And yet in many ways, funny and tragic about it is that we both know how easy and simple it can be for them to be well. That's part of why we created things like we've created to work with people, right? We're now doing a lot of group coaching with people. Our Fundamentals of Wellness course is now live, where we cover all this information. You can find the link below on my link tree. People need a certain amount of basic education and basic baseline knowledge. And then they need some interactive time with you and I, whether that's in a group setting or one-on-one, in order to help them iron out exactly what they need to do for their context in order to be well. But the overarching theme in every single case is that we need to figure out, how has this person disconnected from nature, and what do we need to do in order to reconnect them to nature so that nature will take over, and that natural healing force within us that Hippocrates was talking about. And for those of you who don't know, Hippocrates is the father of Western medicine. He lived in ancient Greece, over 2,000 years ago. And what he said about medicine, I have a dozen quotes from him that are so powerful because they're timeless. They're never going to be not true. And what he said about medicine back in, whatever it is, 400 BC, it's just as true. It's more true today than ever before in some ways, because people have never been so disconnected from nature.
Yeah, I mean, even 30 or 40 years ago, most people had manual labor jobs outside. So they were constantly moving. They were constantly getting out in the sun.
Right.
They were more active. They went to beaches. They played. Most people today, even with us, we have to consciously, one, we do the majority of our work outside, like we are right now, which makes a huge difference. If you look at like blood pressure around the world, it's going up as people around the world start moving inside. The modern medical establishment, they do these studies like, why is blood pressure going up all over the world? And, if you're knowledgeable in this stuff, it's a no-brainer to me. The less UV light people get, the less outdoor time they spend, the higher their blood pressure is going to be, right? So,
right. It's funny you mentioned that, because I was just on
of getting people building some basic habits where, you're getting outside 3 times a day for walks. You're getting up, you're moving around. Because what happens is people will be looking for these big fixes and they don't have, it's the important little things that you do every day, the little habits and the little things over time that build up. But we've got more gyms today than in modern history, and yet we have more obese people, but there's more gyms than there's ever been. There's more people working out than ever, but it's the daily habits that are killing us, literally. And you can't make up for a really horrible indoor life by going to the gym and trying to like burn it off, so to speak, right?
And that's another Hippocrates quote that is one of my favorites. He said, "Illnesses do not come upon us out of the blue. They are developed from small daily sins against nature. When enough sins have accumulated, illnesses will suddenly appear." Sin is a very interesting word. The ancient Greek word sin is actually the same word for what people think of as like moral, immoral behavior. It's the same word as we use in mathematics to define how far from a mark, a line, or has intersected a plane. That's why you have like what we call a sine wave, and it originates from the concept of an arrow flying through the air, and as it drops, right, it will miss the mark. So the idea is missing the mark, and people don't realize they're missing the mark on their health and wellness every single day in small, seemingly inconsequential ways. And we talk about this. I don't know where you got this saying. I don't know if it's a Jim Laird original, but you said it, and it stuck with me so much. So strongly the first time you said it. You said small hinges swing big doors. People don't get how powerful small, seemingly inconsequential habits are. Right. How many times has someone come to us and said, just getting outside more often each day is giving me a better mood, is giving me better sleep. Suddenly I'm losing weight. I just talked to somebody this morning. She said that working with us, she's been with Weight Watchers for almost her whole life, never was able to get to her goals, to achieve her goals with them. And working with us, she's finally managed to lose weight, but she's actually eaten more, which is amazing. We actually have that experience all the time, because number one thing we're telling people to do is eat more protein.
Yep.
And, one of the things about natural protein sources, they tend to be lean, right? One of the things we tell people to do all the time, eat more seafood, particularly shellfish. Another misconception people have is that you need to avoid shellfish because of the toxin load. Well, actually, shellfish don't have very much, heavy metals in them, which is what a lot of people are worried about. And they're incredibly lean a lot of the time. And when they're not lean, they have a lot of omega-3s, which most people are deficient in. And so what we end up seeing when people eat more shellfish is they get an enormous amount of protein. They get huge quantities of trace elements that they badly need to detox from heavy metals. Like selenium really helps people compensate for mercury poisoning, which we see a lot in our high achievers because they love their tuna steak. Ladies, you love your spicy tuna rolls with your girlfriends at sushi night. And we see that all the time. And so little things like this help people connect to nature. The other thing about seafood I've been thinking about recently is that, the powers that be can ruin our soils. They can deplete our soils. They can overfarm our soils. But you can pollute the ocean, but it's a very big body of water to actually really ramp up the pollutants in. And so our shellfish, oysters, scallops, shrimp, crab, short of really terrible local pollution conditions, they're going to have low levels of heavy metals, low levels of pollutants, and really high levels of trace elements because you can't really deplete the sea of its minerals. You can only contaminate it.
And people, you talk about willpower, you talk about why people can't stick to things. One of the reasons why people fail is because they literally try to change too many things at once. Instead of adding something simple in, like, we do 3 10-minute walks a day, right? And what are the side effects of, you throw the little hinges swing big doors, you throw that pebble in the pond, okay? Walking outside 10 minutes 3 times a day stabilizes blood sugar. It gets you outside, you get your eyes in the light, your hormone production gets better.
Yep.
You're able to think better, think clearly, more rational. You make better choices. You stop craving garbage, right? You start craving less alcohol. You start craving less sugary foods. And all of a sudden, you start doing these other things automatically because of the getting outside 3 times a day habit. Your sleep improves. You make better choices. So just doing something simple like that bleeds over into everything else, and it makes other behavior changes
easier.
Right?
Yeah.
And so instead of, people will like, oh, what's walking outside 3 times a day going to do? But when you actually do it and you hear the people say, wow, my sleep's better, I'm thinking better, I'm making better choices.
Right.
As opposed to like doing massive calorie restriction and like trying to like go to HIIT classes.
Right.
And doing whatever supplement you're trying to do to burn this thing off.
Yeah.
We try to get people to learn how to work with their body and to get their body healthier, and then their body just kind of figures out where it needs to go.
Jim, that reminds me, we had we recorded a session recently where we talked about the top 5 weight loss mistakes we see ruining people's health, where we talked specifically about some of those issues. Is that ready yet? Where is that?
Where is that? Well, we have I'll be sharing I have to put that link up. I don't have it in my link tree, but I will.
Okay.
We have to put that sequence up, but
yeah,
it'll
sure
be in my link
to
tree later. Too. It'll be in Dr. Stillman's link tree later, but we have a free video we're giving away. We're also giving away a photon light from Sauna Space, and we're also giving away one of our coaching programs.
Actually, you know what? The 5 weight loss mistakes is in my link tree. If people want to look at that, it's in the video description right now.
Yeah.
So
you can check that out.
Yeah. And blood pressure is another thing that came up this morning in a call with someone, is that their blood pressure is better. We're going to start tapering their blood pressure medication. How did we do it? We got them reconnected to nature. We looked at their minerals. We started balancing those, changing their diet, eating more protein. I don't think people realize how powerful, and source of protein is really important, which people don't understand. They think, oh, and then they get bored of eating protein because they're only eating steak and whey. It's not good. So in this particular case, one of the things I think about with protein is, as I was saying, type of protein or source of protein. People don't realize that things like nuts and seeds have more arginine. Arginine helps to reduce blood pressure because it feeds forward into your nitric oxide synthase pathway. That nitric oxide synthase pathway is activated by, I think it's UVA light from the sun. Those pathways are also affected by vitamin D, which is made by UVB, which is, the other UV frequency that you find in strong sunlight that you get outside during the day, spring, summer, etc. And so get someone to eat nuts, get them to eat more protein, get them to have more arginine, get them to have more UV light, get them to have more nitric oxide synthase. That's why we see big reductions in blood pressure that then allow us to do things like taper their medications.
Well, not only that, and people feeling better, they've done studies that show that people having pictures of nature in their office or like a house plant improve like how they feel, make them less depressed. Imagine if you actually get out in nature itself, how much better that's going to be. Should we jump into the huge can of worms, since it's our first live here, on why animal proteins are superior to plant proteins?
Wow. But what an interesting, comment, right? Because I think what people, when we say superior, though, in almost every context, right, it's always about strategy
and efficiency.
Well, but not just efficiency, but strategy, right?
Right.
So I combine nuts and seeds as protein sources because of the high proportion of arginine,
sure,
and the omega-3s and 6s and the trace elements. Like, for example, you can't get as much manganese from land animal protein as you can from nuts and seeds. I mean, short of some, organ meat that I'm not familiar with that's rich in the amino acid manganese, I'm not familiar with that. But the caveat to that, right, is when we say animal protein, what do we really mean? Because it's a huge breadth of different types of proteins. We're talking about dairy. And dairy from a goat is not the same as dairy from a cow, is not the same as dairy from a water buffalo or a camel or a mare or any other species, right? Is not the same as milk or dairy from a mother, right? Mother's milk.
Right.
And then dairy in and of itself, well, is it cheese? Because cheese is going to have different properties and different, constituents than, say, fresh milk. It's going to be different if it's powdered. It's going to be different if it's preserved, pasteurized, homogenized. I won't get too much deeper into that, but the big categories that we're working with, right, are dairy proteins or dairy sources. We're working with land animal meats. So there's your poultry, your grazing animals, your goats, sheep, bison, beef, etc. There's some more esoteric ones we won't get into. And then there's and then you get your seafoods, right? Your fish and your shellfish. And then the shellfish, there's crustacean shellfish and molluscum shellfish. So, long story short, we like these because they pack a lot of protein. They pack a lot of amino acids that people tend to need more of with the stresses of modern life, and also to meet their goals.
Right.
And this is a tension that we talk about in our work a lot, particularly one-on-one with people. They'll say things like, well, how much protein should I be eating? Or they'll say, what should my testosterone be? And I say, look, technically, if we look back at the literature, there's evidence to suggest that castration actually improves the longevity of men. But I tell men this all the time, and none of them are asking me for a referral for a professional castration, right? No man wants to have a low testosterone level. You talk to virtually any man and say, hey, listen, would you rather live at a fuller, stronger, more intense, exciting, fun life for a shorter period of time? Or would you rather live to a ripe old age and be kind of a doddering old man who can't, really, enjoy all the things that men enjoy about being a man? They almost universally come back, look, I'd rather have a shorter life that's more fun, more exciting, more meaningful. And for most of them, that means doing whatever it takes to optimize their testosterone, optimize their muscle mass. It's funny, we talk about this on a regular basis. We don't like BMI, body mass index, as a metric for health, but it has a place because it's one of the easiest things for us to get, particularly remotely, to understand what someone's body composition is. But one of the things that's interesting about it is that we'll actually tell people we want their BMI to be up at 24 or 25 or even 26, where the literature says that increases their risk of death. But the reality is that with strength and weight training, we think it's going to net reduce their risk of death, so long as that's lean muscle mass that they've gained, not fat mass. And, we also, like, down at 22, at 22 or 23 or whatever in those lower BMI ranges, people don't look their best. They don't feel like they're sexy and attractive, and they don't feel great when they exercise. They have a low exercise capacity. They don't have a high tolerance for exercise. They can't move heavy weights. And I think life's more fun at a BMI, that's a little bit higher from a little bit more muscle mass, and you just can't get there without a lot of animal protein.
Well, yeah. And the thing that I see is people come to me, or this narrative right now that plant proteins are superior. One, because they're better for the environment. Two, there's less cruelty involved. And I always tell people, look, if you're going to eat plant proteins, go for it. But if that's going to be the mainstay of your diet, you're going to have to eat way more calories to get the same amount of protein, right? You get more protein from less calories. And then also with our modern farming, you actually end up killing more animals by eating stuff that's grown in a commercial way than you would if you just ate a cow. So
Right.
We're being sold this narrative that, I tell people, in order for you to get the right amount of protein, you have to combine you just make your life a lot more difficult. So, we're being sold this narrative in the media. We're being sold it, by the elites that, we need to be vegetarians and we need to, basically consume less protein. It's really hard on the environment, but people don't realize that if you raise animals the way they're supposed to be pasture raised, that's one of the best things you can actually do for the environment. So that was kind of my angle on that. But
I entirely agree. The regenerative agriculture movement, people like White Oak Farms or White Oak Pastures, I can't remember the name exactly, but they're stewarding the land in a way where they integrate animal agriculture into the landscape so that they're not depleting the soils, they're not ruining the environment. They're doing it in a sustainable way that is also important for human health, because one of the things we see all the time is the need in our patients and clients for more lean protein.
Right.
And this is something that really only, I think, became very apparent to me in the last few months. We would have people who were, getting to their macronutrient goals. They were even hitting a lot of their wellness goals. They were feeling better, looking better, performing better. But they did even better when we switched them over to more lean protein. And, the land animals tend to be more lean when you feed them on pasture rather than on grains and corns and things like that. And so, I just started to realize I needed to get people onto those lean proteins. The other thing about lean protein, right, is that, and again, I'm not vilifying fat. I'm not afraid of fat. I just noticed that people who are eating fattier and fattier cuts of meat, the thigh with the skin on, if it's a bird, if they're eating fattier cuts of steak, like a ribeye, sometimes they would unwittingly be eating a low protein diet because the fatty acid content of the diet was creating immense satiety. You have a 4 to 6 ounce ribeye, that's a very filling meal. You might be able to polish off an 8 ounce ribeye, but even if you polish off an 8 ounce ribeye, it's not going to have the same protein content as if you polish off an 8 ounce cut of really lean steak, where only, one third or 1/4 of the calories are coming in from fat.
Yeah. So Starlight has a question. If you could get into
Sure.
Are there nuts and seeds that are better consumed, such as macadamia versus almonds? Could you talk about the different types of seeds and the advantages that they have?
Right. It's funny because I actually went over this today with the same person I've been mentioning, and I added in just 4 examples. It was chia seeds, pecans or pecans, walnuts. That's English walnuts, not black walnuts, and pumpkin seeds. So when you add these 4 things in equal quantities, what you'll see is that the omega-3 to 6 ratio is 1 to 4, which is what I like to see. I base that on the studies done in ketogenic diets. They found that ketogenic diets with that ratio minimize the risks of seizure. If that fatty acid ratio mix is good enough to reduce the risk of seizure, it's good enough for me. I think that's a pretty good metric or yardstick for optimizing neurological function. And I also say that having seen a lot of different ratios show up in people's lab testing, when you actually look at their cell membranes, do they have appropriate ratios of fatty acids? And then I looked at the micronutrient content of those different minerals, or I should say nuts and seeds. And what you'll see is that having that variety gives you a really wide range of different nuts and seeds. You might get a ton of manganese from something like pecans, but you might need to eat Brazil nuts to get a significant amount of selenium. You might get a lot of magnesium from chia seeds, but maybe you need pumpkin seeds if you're going to meet your zinc requirement. And that's a really long way of illustrating a very simple principle, which is that different types of foods and different foods in different categories are going to supply you with sometimes radically different profiles of trace elements. So I don't know why pecans have a high level of manganese, and I don't know why pumpkin seeds have a high level of magnesium or zinc. But when people eat or consume only 1 or 2 of a certain type of food, there's a bunch of different problems that they tend to run into. Number one, their nutrient profiles will get skewed toward the minerals, fatty acids, amino acids, and B vitamins as well, that we see a lot of in that food. And that can create some imbalances and some overloads. The other thing that we see, you've seen it as a professional coach, strength coach. I've seen it as a physician. When people over rely on any food, they become more and more likely to develop some kind of intolerance or immune reaction to it. And the number of people who we see eating a lot of dairy, who eliminate the dairy, and some seemingly unconnected symptom goes away, is astonishing. It's not just dairy. I'm not really picking on that, or I guess I am picking on it because it's one of the most common allergens in our modern world. But dairy, gluten, wheat, the 8 major allergens, which I could go into, but I won't. These different foods that we tend to develop these allergies to, by not having too much of them in your diet, you reduce your risk of developing these intolerances or allergies. And I could get into what these things are. I mean, there's a difference between a food intolerance, a food sensitivity, a food allergy. Within food allergy, there's different types of food allergy reactions mediated by different arms of the immune system, which gets very academic. But the point is simply this. I don't tell people to eat 1 or 2 foods. I tell them to eat a really wide range of foods because I've seen it give them the best results. And then I'll tell them, look, these are the food groups that I think you need to be more consistent with.
Well, there's a really simple way to kind of see if you've got any major imbalances in your or holes in your diet is chronometer. You can put your own data in there, and it'll give you a breakdown of the things that you got too much of, the things you're missing.
Right.
That's a really good way to do that.
Yeah, and it's funny because I had a podcast with Ben Greenfield. It came out a couple months ago now, I think. Maybe it was last month. But Ben and I talked about this on the podcast. It may have been another part that got cut off, but if it was, we talked about how we both use chronometer in coaching people. And a lot of people are using chronometer because chronometer has this ability to show people exactly what they're eating. It can be a little bit overwhelming at times for people who are not used to tracking their diet and are not used to measuring things out into the gram quantity. But that's why I use it. I started using it in my early 30s, a couple years ago.
Those are like last week, right?
Yeah, right. Thanks, Jim. So I started using it, and I didn't realize how. I mean, I was thinking, okay, I'm 30 something. I've been reading about nutrition for almost 20 years. I'm fascinated by it. I've read so many labels. I've done this, I've done that, I've studied with this person, I've studied with that person, but I put my data into a chronometer and I thought, oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was actually eating. And we see this all the time. I mean, we see so many people coming in to work with us who think they're eating enough protein and they're not, and they don't know how to eat enough protein. Right. Because there are strategies and tactics that are essential if you're really going to break through to the level that is going to optimize your health, your performance, your weight loss, your muscle mass gain, your body composition, your sleep, your mood, just your whole performance. We cover all that in the fundamentals of wellness. We had our first coaching call for that on Saturday. These end up being very small coaching calls. People get lots of basically one-on-one time with Jim and I, where that we get to ask them questions, get to know them, get to know what they're dealing with, help them troubleshoot their issues. You can find links to that program in the link below through my link tree. I think it's the first or second link. And I also want to add that, this is one of the most important things we teach people and help them to troubleshoot when it comes to their weight loss, which Jim and I will be having a webinar on at the end of the month. That link's also in my link tree in the link below.
Yes, it's very true.
Jim, any last closing thoughts?
Get outside as much as you can.
Right.
If you're one of these people that are stuck in an office, like I changed my entire life so I could live a more outdoor life. I sold my gym and I was spending 5 a.m. till 8 p.m. inside. And I had some health issues. So I made some major changes. I didn't start work until 10. I fired a lot of clients. It really sucked, but it changed my life. And now I've redesigned my life so I can literally spend 98% of my day outside. You can tell by how dark I am. So start where you are. You might not be able to go all in at first, and that's totally okay. But people take smoke breaks all the time. You take a sun break at work. Go for a walk in the morning, get your morning light, go for a walk in the evening, take movement breaks throughout the day, take 10 or, every 30, 40 minutes, get up, move around, sit in a deep squat, go for a walk. You have to make these small changes daily are going to have way bigger compounding effects in the long run than trying to use intensity to get out of the hole you're in.
That's exactly right. And that's why people come to us and we'll actually dial back their intensity and help them get better results. So on that note, Jim, thanks for joining me. To all of you listening, thank you for listening. Make sure to like, subscribe, share this with someone who needs it, and we will see you next time.